Can't even cook a meal? Freeze out in the yard? With that, Ben closed the window and locked it from the inside. I immediately rushed to the window. Please open it, I pleaded, pounding on the window, but Ben just smirked and closed the curtains. I rubbed my body, freezing in the cold. I could feel the warmth that had been provided by the heater being stripped away from me. What should I do if this continues? Even the baby in my stomach. Just as I was about to lose consciousness due to the overwhelming cold and the shock of being locked out, a savior extended his hand to me. Are you okay? The next day, I returned home with him. In the yard, Ben was freezing naked. Surprised at the sight, Nick stepped forward. You said it, didn't you? If you can't even cook properly, then freeze outside, Nick said to Ben with a cold voice and gaze. Ben, who had been freezing in the yard, couldn't even respond properly. I'll call an ambulance out of the last shred of mercy and want to say anything to him before they arrive. Nodding to his words, I took a step closer to Ben. My name is Anne. I'm a 28-year-old housewife. My mother passed away from an illness shortly after I started working, and then my father followed her, dying suddenly from a heart attack. As an only child, I was left alone, and I tried to fill the void by throwing myself into work. Are you okay? You seem to be pushing yourself too hard. Ben, my husband, was the one who spoke to me. Ben was someone who would comfort my grieving heart, a person who would support me when I cried alone. After I had calmed down, he approached me, and we started dating. After a few years of dating, we got married. I'm so happy for you, marrying such a lovely woman. Ben has brought home a wonderful woman, said Mike. After getting married, I started living with my in-laws. I had a good relationship with my in-laws. I saw on TV the other day that a new cafe opened near the station. Let's go there together sometime. Yes, I'd love to, especially with Jane, I said. I hit it off well, going out to eat together once a week. I also got along well with Mike, who loves cooking, and we sometimes cook together in the kitchen. I'm happy you get along with my family, though Nick can be a bit troublesome, right? Not at all. I didn't talk much with Nick, my brother-in-law, because he works from home and often stays in his room. However, I was interested in his work, and when I asked about it, he kindly explained it to me. In this way, I got along well with my in-laws. A few years after getting married, I became pregnant with Ben's child. Due to severe morning sickness, I decided to quit my job. That's probably for the best. Don't push yourself. This wasn't a decision I made alone, but was after thoroughly discussing it with my in-laws. With the earnings of Ben and Nick alone, we could live comfortably, and I had savings of my own. Mike was working, and Jane had a part-time job, so there were no issues with me quitting. Pregnant women are lucky. They don't have to work, and no one complains. Recently, Ben started to complain about it. He was present at the discussion, and at the time, was the first to suggest I should quit, acting all high and mighty with no job. Who's acting high and mighty? When have I ever ordered you around? In fact, I'm the one picking up the clothes you've strewn about and putting them in the washer. But being naturally competitive, I always argued back and managed to out-talk Ben every time. If you had complaints, you should have brought them up during our discussion. It was Ben who brought it up first. Exactly. Instead of complaining, take care of your own stuff. With the support of my in-laws, Ben found himself isolated without any help. Nick and Ben weren't on good terms, and Nick wouldn't side with Ben. Ben looks down on me because I work from home. He doesn't listen to what I have to say and doesn't consider me an ally. Nick would mutter such things, so he wouldn't even join in on these conversations. Ben seemed displeased with the situation, becoming even more complainative when we were alone. Don't get cocky just because my family likes you. I'm not getting cocky. Everyone just has common sense. Even when it was just the two of us, I never lost to Ben. However, as morning sickness began to set in, I found myself losing the energy to argue back. Being pregnant isn't an illness. If you're not working, you're no different from a it. I agree that pregnancy isn't an illness, but Anne is risking her life to nurture a life. That alone is work enough. Nick came to my rescue. He would quickly come to my aid whenever Ben complained and report to my in-laws. While Ben was being scolded by my in-laws, he took care of me. It's hard to tell who the dad is here, I muttered, stroking my belly. Well, with my in-laws keeping watch, maybe Ben will change eventually. Until then, I had believed in Ben. Oh, Ben's not back yet. Back yet. Seems like it. Just then, Ben started coming home late. He claimed it was overtime, but I couldn't be sure. Even on his days off, he'd say, "I have to work on the weekend. It's busy, so I'll stay over at the company." And sometimes he wouldn't come home. Honestly, I suspected Ben of cheating. My in-laws thought the same, and we divided tasks to gather evidence, but it was hard to come by. He only went in and out of the company, and there didn't seem to be any specific woman involved. "It's hard to know what's going on inside the company," I said. I asked his colleagues, but they said there wasn't anything unusual. And don't push yourself. Around that time, my morning sickness worsened, and I couldn't do any household chores. But it wasn't a problem since Mike did the cooking and Jane took care of the other chores, with Nick also helping out. Aren't you ashamed, lying around doing nothing as a housewife? What's the point of you being in this house? Ben would wake me up in the middle of the night to say such things. Seeing his parents doing the chores, I frowned. "A guy who does nothing as a husband has no right to say that," Nick argued back. "You always go against me, the eldest son. That's because you're not a brother I can respect. You've always been insolent." This led to a brotherly fight which was about to turn into a brawl before the in-laws, alerted by the noise, stopped them. They listened to the story and scolded Ben. "That's enough. Do whatever you want." "Wait, Ben, where are you going?" Ben left without answering me. "I'm really sorry about Ben. We are truly sorry." My in-laws apologized on Ben's behalf, and that was the end of the discussion. But Ben's attitude was getting worse. Something had to be done soon. I was at a loss. What should I do? Is something the matter? One Saturday, my in-laws were going on a trip to a local event. It was planned in advance, but they seemed concerned about Ben's recent attitude. "We're worried about leaving you behind." "It's okay. The morning sickness has gotten much better." I sent off my worried in-laws with a smile, and they left for a 2 to 3 day trip. At the same time, Nick also had an overnight engagement. "I'm sorry to leave you at a difficult time. Don't worry about it. Take care." Soon after the in-laws left, Nick also departed. Today and usually, Ben was at home and still asleep. "Well then, I should do what I can," I muttered, standing up. Honestly, I still wasn't feeling well, but if I just lay down and did nothing, I wouldn't know what Ben would say. Fortunately, the fridge was filled with meals that Mike had prepared in advance. I began cleaning and doing laundry at a slow, manageable pace. "Hey, make me a meal." "Did you just wake up?" Ben finally woke up around noon. His hair was a mess, and he demanded a meal with a sullen face. While I was taken aback, I took out one of Mike's prepared meals from the fridge. "What's that?" "You mean Mike's prepared meal? You're a housewife and can't even cook." Hearing that made me instantly angry. Why should I be spoken to like that? Whose child do they think I'm carrying? I don't deserve to be treated like this. "I'm sorry, but right now my job is to protect the child in my stomach. Looking after adults is secondary." "How dare you speak to your husband like that?" Just as Ben yelled at me, the door opened. Standing there was Nick. I could hear the yelling from outside. "You shut in?" Ben glared at Nick, muttered an insult, and went back to his room. It seemed like he made some noise before apparently leaving. Nick sighed at that. "Are you okay?" "Yes, but what brings you here?" "I came back for something I forgot," Nick said, looking worried. Seeing his expression reminded me of Jane, and I couldn't help but give a wry smile. "It's okay. Really, go on. Off you go." "I'll be back." Nick looked at me with concern, hesitated, then left. Where did the Ben I first met disappear to? If things continue this way, divorce. But I still want to be family with my in-laws. Feeling tired, I decided to lie down for a bit. Closing my eyes, I soon fell into a deep sleep. It's time to wake up. I woke up hastily, meeting the eyes of a smirking Ben. I had fallen asleep completely, expecting to be scolded by an exasperated Ben. I'd let you sleep, but it's evening already. Contrary to my expectations, Ben spoke to me kindly. Surprised, I stared at him. I've prepared dinner, so come eat once you're fully awake. Saying that, Ben left. A blanket was covering my body. Had been with that question in mind, I headed to the kitchen. There, Mike's prepared meals were warmed up, ready to eat. I'm sorry, Anne. Ben, I was happy to hear we were having a child, but I became incredibly anxious and took it out on you. This is my apology, Ben said, offering me a cake. Honestly, this gesture alone couldn't make up for his previous behavior, but I was genuinely happy he apologized for the moment. I decided to forgive him, and we enjoyed the meal together. Look, it's starting to snow. Oh, really? Let's go have a look, Ben suggested, heading towards the balcony. Amused by his childlike behavior, I followed him. Indeed, in the dark of the night, the sight of white snow falling was beautiful. Coming from a region where it rarely snows, this was a fresh experience for me, and I carelessly moved closer. Here, let's open the window a bit. No, it's cold. You'll be fine if you wear a jacket, Ben said, putting a jacket on me and opening the window. The cold air rushed in, and as I shivered, he pulled me by the arm. Huh? Before I knew it, I was outside. Turning around, I saw Ben smirking maliciously. A housewife who doesn't do housework is a failure as a wife. Reflect on that overnight. Huh? What are you talking about? I can't even cook a meal? Freeze out in the yard with that, Ben said as he closed the window and locked it from the inside. I immediately rushed to the window. Please open it. I pounded on the window, but Ben just smirked and closed the curtains. I rubbed my body, freezing from the cold. I could feel the warmth that had been provided by the heater being stripped away from me. What should I do if this continues? Even the baby in my stomach. Just as I was about to lose consciousness due to the overwhelming cold and the shock of being locked out, a savior extended his hand to me. He then helped me into his car. Why are you outside on a night like this? The one who helped me was Nick. Nick had cut his stay short, concerned about Ben. Feeling the car's heater warming me up, I exhaled. Just to be safe, let's go to the hospital, Nick suggested, taking me to the hospital. Thanks to Nick's quick action, fortunately, both the baby and I were fine. While I was being examined, Nick apparently arranged for a hotel stay. We were able to stay at the hotel, but Nick left for somewhere else. I'm really glad you're going to be a strong child. I caressed my belly with relief for having arrived at the hotel safely. I was truly glad nothing had happened. Exhausted from everything that had happened, I lay down on the bed and fell asleep. And are you okay now? Yes, thank you so much. No problem. Shall we go then? The next day, I returned home with him. In the yard, Ben was freezing, naked. Surprised at the sight, Nick stepped forward. You said it, didn't you? If you can't even make a meal, freeze outside, Nick said to Ben with a cold voice and gaze. Ben, freezing in the yard, couldn't properly respond. I'll call an ambulance, Nick said, out of the last shred of mercy, and wanted to say anything to him before they arrived. Nodding to his words, I took a step closer to Ben. You almost caused our unborn child serious harm. I will never forgive you. Be prepared. Then Ben was taken to the hospital, and I asked Nick what had happened the night before. After dropping me off at the hotel, Nick returned home alone. He found Ben and a woman who appeared to be his mistress naked in the living room. It seemed he invited his mistress over, thinking we wouldn't be home. Out of the way, he felt completely at ease. Enraged, Nick apparently threw Ben out naked. See who the real trash is after spending the night outside, he said. Then after intimidating the frozen mistress into giving up evidence, Nick forcibly sent her back to her own home. Apparently the mistress had a family too, and by the time everything was reported, dawn was breaking. Nick took a nap in the car and then came to pick me up. My parents have been informed. They'll be coming home today, Nick said with a kind smile, staying close to me until my in-laws returned. It's okay now, Nick. Thank you so much. No, I just did what anyone would. Thanks to him, I felt safe staying at home. I'm so sorry. We're truly sorry for what Ben has done. Upon their return, my in-laws immediately scolded Ben. It was decided that Ben would pay me compensation and child support before being kicked out. I'm sorry. It was a moment of folly. I truly love only you. Ben pleaded with me, but I ignored him. Just stop with your foolishness. Don't look at me with those eyes. Then Ben flew into a rage and hit me. Enough, you idiot. Nick caught his hand, with Mike joining in. Ben was overwhelmed, and I just gave in to temptation and embraced Nick. Jane watched him being driven away. He remained pitiful to the end. That's all I thought about. Ben, Nick is really strong considering what had just happened and how he managed to throw a grown man outside. I was amazed by Nick's strength. Yeah, Nick used to do judo. He wouldn't normally use his skills on anyone, though. Nick returned, laughing refreshingly at his own modesty, which unexpectedly made my heart skip a beat. Jane laughed at my reaction. He's got a handsome face and strong arms. It's a mystery why he doesn't have a girlfriend. Quiet, Nick looked away, slightly embarrassed, which I found rather endearing. Given my situation of having no family or anyone else to rely on, I continued to stay with my in-laws. If you'd allow me, I'd love to hold the baby. Of course. Now, the four of us eagerly await the birth of our precious child. I learned from Nick that the mistress was a co-worker of Ben's. No wonder they wouldn't answer honestly when asked. They had been behaving like a couple at work, and the co-worker's husband thoroughly investigated. After receiving that evidence, we both received adequate compensation and divorced. Both were fired for their actions during work hours and for claiming date expenses as work-related. The reason I know this is because as I begged him, "Please forgive me," Ben came back to the in-laws' house. He pleaded for help, but my in-laws said, "How dare you show your face here? Don't burden us anymore. Never show us your face again." They drove him away with unanimous disapproval. Through it all, Nick was the most dependable, and I found myself drawn to him. Thank you for all your help. No problem. Wanting to help someone you like is natural, right? Huh? Nick's face turned red and so did mine, influenced by his reaction. Then I realized that Nick had liked me for a long time. Everyone seems to react negatively when I talk about my job, but you always listened earnestly. Seeing you interested in what I had to say, but you were Ben's wife, so I thought I should keep these feelings hidden, he said, looking down, causing me to look down as well. I had no idea he felt that way about me. Honestly, I'm not ready to be in that kind of relationship with anyone right now. I understand. But if you can wait a bit longer, I'd like to respond to those feelings. He looked up at my words, then he smiled at me. Yes, I'll do my best to appeal to you from now on. I'll be ready. Our interaction was fully observed by my in-laws, making dinner that night an extravagant affair. Finally, Nick has a girlfriend. Stop it! Jane's excitement was evident while Nick blushed and protested. Mike and I exchanged glances and laughed. Later, I gave birth to a beautiful daughter on the due date. She's so cute. Congratulations. She really looks like you. She's going to be a beauty. No man will leave her alone. I don't want to let her marry, Nick said, prompting the in-laws to chime in that he was getting ahead of himself. I couldn't help but laugh at Nick, who was already feeling like a father. Nick continued to be considerate towards me, actively participating in childcare. The in-laws were the same, ensuring someone was always there for me, allowing me to raise my daughter with peace of mind. And 100 days after breaking ties with Ben, Nick proposed. I want to be her father. Please marry me. You're rushing it. First we should date, right? Either is fine by me. Nick smiled happily at my words. This scene was again witnessed by Jane, who teased me about it afterward. Meanwhile, Ben, having been fired and forced to repay the embezzlement and compensation for me and our daughter, took on debt from dangerous sources and is now missing, wherever he is. I hope he's managing. The in-laws are all doting on the grandchild, showing no concern for Ben. Nick seems to have forgotten Ben's existence altogether. Years later, I remarried Nick. Our daughter calls him Dad, and Nick has become a doting parent. We're having a boy next. That's great. Whether he looks like me or like Nick, a boy resembling either would be nice too. I'm pregnant with our second child. Our daughter is excited to become a big sister. We're all thinking about what to name him, likely going with our daughter's suggestion. I'll make you all happy. You're included in that too. We plan to live happily together as a family of 6. We'll live closely and joyfully. That's a promise Nick and I have made, looking forward to going out as a complete family once the baby arrives.